Okay. Dr. John Kitui is the country director, OXFAM Kenya. He's here with us. We want to talk about Kenya's election, the promises, the gaps, the expectations that we have as we head into the election. Dr. Kitui, good morning.
Good morning, Latif.
Welcome back to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you for inviting me again.
It's good to have you. The last time you were here, we were talking about the budget. Budget has been read. Where is the money going? Where is the money going to come from? Was the previous money gotten? Was it used prudently? Now we are going to an election.
Yes.
We are debating amongst ourselves how the counting is done. So the Standard says there are 3 days to the general election, and we're wondering 3 days. 3 days means what?
72 hours. Or how far? How are you looking at it?
Yeah, where are you coming from? Are we counting from
Are we counting today?
today, tomorrow, Sunday?
This city's thing
Or
of
is
Sunday
tomorrow,
not-
Sunday, Monday?
No, I
Or
mean,
is it
Or the
today,
Saturday and Sunday is not being counted.
why
and
don't
then
we go
skip
from the
Sunday?
very beginning? You know, we're having this debate because we're saying there are 3 days or 4 days.
Yeah.
Why didn't we ask when there were 28 days remaining? Why are we asking now?
my counting has always been off. I've been told. Edna told me I've done less than. But I'm always counting the day of and the day before.
Okay, when we started talking about God knows how many days to the election, were we counting Saturday and Sunday as
We
well?
should have been. Because
No,
those
no,
are
no,
days.
no.
Through you
Were
live,
we
you live
counting-
We don't know.
Were we talking of working days or were we just counting all days?
We never scrutinized that
Never,
number.
never ask it. But now
Count
it
the
just
full
made
24
sense.
hours.
Exactly. Just
So
like
that's
Eric
Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
must be counted. Plus today.
So you can't count Sunday.
Why?
See, this paper was printed 24 with the 24 hours in it.
With the intention that you read it in today. Somewhere.
And a full
At
today
some
is
point
24
today.
hours. Friday,
But they-
Saturday, Sunday,
No,
Monday.
Sunday doesn't count.
What did Sunday do to you?
It didn't do anything to me. I am merely going by what I see and I've been seeing for the longest time. A public holiday falls on a Sunday, you have a holiday on Monday. Sunday doesn't count.
It counts because you're already off that day and they want to give you the privilege of then celebrating the day itself.
Precisely. So why are you counting it now?
Because they won't give you double on whatever. They want you to enjoy another day.
So August has 31 days minus Sundays.
Can you imagine? That's what
No.
City's trying to say.
The Sunday becomes an issue only when there's a public holiday. Otherwise, it's just a normal day.
Oh.
Yes. It's actually an additional day. Even when you look at your leave days, if you work on a leave day, they give you one other day. Don't they? So this arithmetic, I'm not making it up. I'm just talking about things which are
Dr.
there.
Kitui, how many days do you count to the election?
All days.
How many?
4 days.
4 days.
Yes.
Me too, man.
Okay.
You guys keep counting.
How many are you counting, Latif?
5.
Why are you people
I'm
bothering
including
about counting?
Tuesday.
Why?
Are you including Tuesday itself?
But
I know
why?
some politicians are saying Tuesday by 6 a.m. These elections will be done.
So for
So
them,
don't
Tuesday
count
is not an
Tuesday.
issue.
I'm voting at 6 p.m.
Why are people bothered about the number of days when we know the election is on Tuesday? It's Tuesday. So whether it is 5 days to Tuesday,
Because the
3
event
days
is
to
taking
Tuesday,
place on
it's
Tuesday. Tuesday is not being counted. But I'm counting today as a full day. From when, let's say, from when that thing was printed. Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay, are you
Monday.
happy?
It's okay. Let's move on.
No.
Tomorrow is the final day of the campaigns.
See?
Sindio?
Definitive.
Tomorrow, final days of campaign. Why? Because we have to stop campaigning how many hours before the election? 48. Sindio? So, we have seen the campaigns, Dr. Kitui, over the last couple of the official campaign period and the non-official campaign period, unofficial campaign period. We've seen the promises that are being made. We've seen the manifestos that have been unleashed by the various campaigns, whether it's a presidential, whether it's a gubernatorial. MPs are also coming with all the promises. If you look at this year's election and then compare maybe to the 2017, 2013 election, is there a difference in the terms of the campaign messaging and the way the promises are being packaged?
I think when you look at the promises, they are business as usual political promises. So we can go back way back to 2007. There are same promises that are being made, repackaged a bit, panel bet with a few technical expertise, but they're same promises. I think the question one has to ask is, do they address our most important questions as a nation? And the second question one has to ask is, will they be done? And I think as Kenyans, we are kind of getting used to, in a very bad way, we're getting used to being lied to by politicians, that they have this very beautiful manifesto. And then in 2027, they'll come back to us and say, guys, give us 5 years. You know, the first 5 years, we were just setting the groundwork.
No, we
now
got
these
in.
other 5 years,
We inherited the failures.
turn or tenor, so as to fix. But I think fundamentally, I think we have to ask if they are addressing the fundamental.
How would you answer that question? If you look at the promises that have been made, okay, same promises 2013, even before. But let's just start with this 2013. I'm starting with that because, new system and all. 2013, 2017, 2022. The promises. Are they touching the pulse of the nation? Are they addressing what needs to be addressed? Are they responding to the needs?
Now, to answer that question, I think the other question we have to ask is, what is the state best placed to do to solve the problems that we face as a nation? And I think the problem that I've always had with the political manifestos, as we talk at the moment, is governments coming to power telling us they're going to grow the economy. Governments do not grow the economy. The citizens grow the economy. The private sector grows the economy. And so one of the fundamental problems also that the politicians are presenting that is completely a myth is that we are coming and we are going to grow this economy by this percentage. We are going to grow our GDP. We are going to create jobs. You don't create jobs as a state. You create an enabling environment for us citizens, for the private sector, to apply entrepreneurial skills, to innovate, to start businesses, to create jobs. But I think the manifesto, for Kenya Kwanza, for example, I think it predominantly calls us human capital. And that's one of the things I want to problematize today, that we are not human capital. We are people. The Constitution does not say we, the human capital of this nation. It says we, the people. So the state should create an enabling environment for citizens to thrive, to be entrepreneurial, to have access to education, all those equalizing issues, to have access to good health, and then the freedom to engage in enterprise and to grow and to grow the economy, for that matter. But I find that the manifestos that have been presented are presented like, don't worry, when we come to power, we're going to grow this economy from bottom up, or we're going to grow this economy by industrializing this country. And I think we have to interrogate that. Is the state meant to industrialize? Is the state meant to grow the economy? Or what role does it play? And I think we can look back at how most of the countries that have developed and developed equitably have, is that they create an enabling environment. And I think for me, all the manifestos that I've looked at lack a very good articulation of what they think they will do to enable that. It's a list of goodies to entice us to vote.
So then, are these promises then fallacious in nature because those making the promises do not know this fundamental thing that you have said, that the state does not grow the economy, or because they think that the citizens do not know that the power actually does rest in their hands?
It's both. I think we look as citizens usually look at, and I think we are told often that your vote is your right, and sometimes we exercise that vote as a right, but just for the sake of it. I think it would probably work differently if we thought of the vote as our power instead. That this vote, we are voting for something that should enable us exercise our power in return. So I think it partly is because the political class know that we'll just vote, and if they give us as many goodies as possible, we will vote for them.
You'll feel honored.
Yes, whether those goodies are in their manifestos in terms of what they will do for us, give us, or whether those goodies are the 100 shillings or 200 shillings that we get on the campaign trail.
Do you think that when people vote, they actually consider what it is that they need and who it is among the contestants is most likely to give what they need to them?
And I think that's part of the problem, the citizenry. The citizenry, do we vote like that, Muga? Because I think that's a question that is an empirical one, isn't it? We have to ask, do we vote looking at the manifestos? What is it that the state will create an enabling environment for me to thrive? And I think I've said this before. In Kenya, and I think in many countries that are very diverse as Kenya, we vote on the basis of our ethnic affiliation. On the majority of Kenyans will not go to the ballot because they are voting for you on the basis of your manifesto. Many of them will go to vote for their people and for their tribal chiefs and for their ethnic affiliations, and they will suspend all judgment. So whether that manifesto is there or not, the majority, and I dare say the majority actually, will vote on the basis of tribe. So I think partly is the Western imposition of the democratic model that is partly a problem. I think we should have designed our democracy in a way that accommodates that.
But let me ask the question, because that arguably could be said to be true of our rural areas. But our big cosmopolitan towns where communities are actually mixed, fairly mixed, one could argue, as you're arguing, that people will vote along those lines. But then there's a little creation of the Constitution that has come to rear its head even more. It's called the independent candidate. Do you think the independent candidate, because we've seen them being elected and the numbers are growing, do you think the independent candidate and those who support independent candidates, for whatever reason, because that's a different discussion, they support the individual who is the independent candidate, do you think it eventually influences or affects the presidential voting?
It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to say. So I think at the grassroots level, people usually vote for the person that they more likely believe they either like or is going to do something differently.
Or their village mate.
Yes. And people vote, or their village mate, but people vote at that and does not affect the presidential level. I think Kenyans now I think when you look at how the Kenyans are voting now, Kenyans have matured. We don't vote like the six-piece as we used to do in the good old days. So people at the MCA level, you will vote your independent candidate, especially if you believe they were rigged out during the nominations, or they make you believe that it was an unfair process, that they did not get the ticket of the party they want. People will vote for them. And then at the presidential level, they'll vote for a different candidate of the different party that they have. And even at gubernatorial level, you may have that citizens vote for a different person at that level as well, at the president. So I don't think for me the independent candidate per se affects who the person votes for at the presidential level.
Actually, I'm expanding the discussion further. You see, there's the independent candidate who stands on an independent ticket.
Yeah.
But if we go, again, using your argument that certain regions are more or less blocked off along tribal lines and along certain party chief lines, okay? If somebody vies for a position on a ticket other than the one which is popular in that particular region, I'm referring to them also as independent because they are not going with the flow.
Yes.
Okay? Now, why I'm asking this question is because for the longest time in the history of this particular country, there's always been two debates. One about voter padding and voter suppression. It has been there for the longest time.
Yeah.
In the days of the one-party system, it was simpler. They didn't really bother with all those scientific things. All they would do is if somebody was favored, even if the person who was running against you won, they'd just give you that person's vote. And then you could go to court if you want. And the court result was already more or less determined. But what it points down to in my mind is that we have accepted certain malpractices as being normal in our election system. Now, if you look at the papers today, the deputy president is talking about such a thing. There's hardly any election, with the exception of 2002, that this discussion has not reared its head. If indeed this election, the current one we have, were to go the way 2002 went, where people actually just vote, you count and you figure these are the outcomes. Again, it's within that background that I was asking, do you think that those who vote for the independent candidates would of necessity just vote for the independent candidates and also vote independently for a president?
No, I don't think so.
Why?
Because I think when you look at the stakes at the local level, they're completely different, especially in homogeneous communities. And I think let's go to a rural area. Let's use the example of Nyanza. If you go to very remote villages of Siaya, if someone thinks that the nominations were not fair and they ran independently in a different party, and they had a huge following in that community, my bet is that the citizens will give them the vote at that level. When it comes
whether
to
it's MCA,
whether it's MCA or
governor,
member of
MP, blah.
parliament, if you thought you were rigged out, you went to a different party or you ran as an independent and you have a very huge following, you're actually likely to win at the local level because people just vote for you because they believe if the nominations were fair, you would have gotten the ticket of the
dominant party.
of the dominant party. But at the national level, I think for me the dynamics would still be that the
dominant party
candidate will
take the
will
votes.
take the vote. Yes.
Why were you heading there, City?
Thank you very much for asking the question, Eric. The reason why I was heading in that direction is because there are kingpins in literally every region, but not all kingpins produce presidential candidates. So then people have what you call affiliations. Then comes to traditional support. Areas that are known to support this individual, the others are known to support this individual. But that tradition has been marred with change over time. You'd find a region that was considered to be traditional in this direction have moved. Now, the one region that hasn't been tested well with this is the mountain region, because they've always had a candidate from the region standing. This is the first time in the history of this country that there is no candidate from the mountain who is standing.
Yeah.
So now, the argument here is there is an overwhelming support, it is alleged, in a certain direction. Now, the question I'm asking is, in the previous years, in the intervening years of this particular country's development, from what I have observed, the homogeneous voting in central Kenya is when there's only one candidate from the region. When there are two, those votes tend to get split. Now,
There's hardly ever been one candidate in that region.
actually, there has been a dominant candidate.
Dominant.
Yes,
Not
there's
one.
always been. There are always people who want to stand and claim that they want to be president, but the likelihood of them even being members of parliament can be put into question. So I'm talking about the dominant ones who people rally behind. So I am saying the democratic perspective has been that region has shown an inclination towards being able to split their votes and decide, no, we're not going this way. We prefer this particular person. If you go further back into history, you'll find that certain parts of that particular region had strongholds in the opposition of the KANU government at Kenyatta's time even. Now, the question I'm asking is, how certain are we that the reasons why people vote in that diversified way, and to talk of diversity, look at the way that region changes the members of parliament. It is something worth studying and documenting. So it means that's a region that clearly shows a certain independence in the way they go about their business.
And I think, Muga, I think that when you look at the democratic process, I think for me, my observation is when you go to the grassroots level, especially in a near homogeneous community, from an ethnic perspective, I think you see true democracy. And I think you can go even to Western Kenya, you can go to the mountain, you can go to Nyanza. At the local level, there's true democracy because of that homogeneity. So people, I think, now start thinking about issues. Are you addressing the real issues? Are you articulating them in a way that speaks to me? And I think you see the turnover of the members of parliament, for example, the local leaders, is very, very high, or governors for that matter. But I think the dynamics shift to the national level where we don't see that democraticness or that diversity or that ability to vote on the basis of issues. But I think that will change with the time, because I think especially as we see a lot of young people come into the voting, I think they're less tribal than the older folks. And apologies to say that to the older folks. But I think the younger generations, guys who are graduating, they care about jobs. They are coming to the job markets and there are no jobs. They are looking for an enabling environment for them to be entrepreneurial, and they will vote on those matters of principle as opposed to
what
ethnic.
makes you think they're less tribal?
I think
If, as you say, the older folks are tribal and the older folks are the parents, you're saying that influence that someone has growing up just dissipates in the air because somebody is younger.
Yes, it does, but it's because they're dealing with a completely different set of problems for them. They're looking at, most of them are very entrepreneurial. They have a lot of knowledge. They have graduated. They have skills. They can't get the jobs they want. They're looking for an opportunity.
They have knowledge, not necessarily skills. Skills is what they will acquire if they get the jobs that they're looking for.
Yeah,
Yes.
you'd argue that,
Yes.
yes. But they're looking for an enabling environment for them to thrive, for them to apply their knowledge,
Yes.
to develop their skills in a very entrepreneurial way. And I think for me, that should be able to drive, especially in the face of huge inequalities that we see as a nation.
Actually-
they are likely to vote on the basis of manifestos
Alright.
as opposed to the ethnic.
If I go by the argument you put across, and it's a persuasive argument, then what you're saying is that the traditional voting patterns are likely to change.
Yes.
What are these traditional voting patterns that you keep talking about?
Just along tribal lines. I mean, one doesn't keep
Are
too
they
much of
always
us.
along tribal lines?
Yes.
And are they just on tribal lines, or are they
No.
on tribal issues as well?
No,
For
they are-
example, let me
yes.
ask you. The people of Northeastern Province have never had a presidential candidate.
No,
They've never had a deputy presidential candidate.
Never.
So how have they been voting nationally?
They've
Is it
been
on
vo-
tribal lines, or
Yes.
is it on tribal issues?
they vote on tribal lines because, as a tribe or as a community, given the paternalistic way in which the community is organized, they look at what they think will benefit them.
So tribal issues.
The tribal is the tribe votes.
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
So it's not
But
it's
it's
not
this
saying
other-
that one ethnic group
On this
comes
other-
together and wins.
On the other areas, you could argue, like when you're talking about, like Nyanza, Rift Valley,
Yes.
Central.
Yes.
When there's a candidate, it doesn't matter the issue.
Yes.
It is our guy is on the ballot.
Yes.
We are rallying behind our guy.
Yes.
The issues that he has, yes, we're hearing the issues, and we will listen to the issues, and in fact, we'll go back and start evangelizing those issues. Not necessarily because we bought them, but it's because it's the guy.
Yeah.
But the people of these other areas, I would want to argue that they think about, so which of these people has come and promised us and understood our issues?
Actually-
the people of the coast will look at, so traditionally, over the last couple of years, they've been voting along for Raila Odinga. Why? Because Raila has connected with their issue.
The thing is, if you give the example of Northeastern Province, they are a business community. Yes, they are pastoralists and they are nomads, but they're a business community. Now, they understand the dynamics of their communities better than we do. So, and they also know that they're not many. So, if one positions themselves in terms of interest, interest in this country is based on, in my opinion, one simple thing: who do we think is going to be the president? That's what you support. It has nothing to do with what they said, who they said it to. If you think it's going to be in this direction, that's where you move towards.
Yeah.
But also the old pattern has been that even the smaller tribes have their own tribal chiefs as well. And their kingpin has always wanted to be also in government in a very senior position. And they rally their communities behind them as a negotiating position to negotiate for being part of the government. And so this ethnic chiefs or the tribal chiefs come together and they form a winning coalition purely just because you have the numbers of the smaller parties, and then you appoint them in cabinet or give them senior government positions. So either way, I think the pattern of voting over the past has been on ethnic basis. But I think my assumption is, especially as we see a lot of young people start voting, and I'm hoping that this year is one of those years that a lot of young people vote, is that those dynamics will start to change. And I think our democracy will start maturing, because now politicians will know that we can't just put together a few chiefs
Dr.
and then
Kitui,
win.
everything you've just been describing shows the maturity of our democracy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It shows that we understand. You get to government, you get your person in there, the person in there champions your cause, and the community benefits. That's it. So everything is... Anyway, let's take a break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
If you look at the manifestos then, from even the work that you've been doing at OXFAM Kenya, you've been looking at various indices, poverty, you've been looking at, development levels. Is there any manifesto that is really touching on alleviating poverty, creating a conducive environment to alleviate poverty?
I think most of the manifestos I've read do a very excellent job in the analysis of what the root problems are. Okay. So the problem of poverty, the inequality. Some of them touch on the current ongoing drought, for example, in the northern parts of Kenya. We see like 4.1 million people on the verge of they're foods insecure.
Yep.
2 million people desperately need support. And as a country, we are doing a very horrible job trying to support them. The little that's going there, I think we've reached about only 500,000 people out of 4.1 million of food insecure. So when you look at the Constitution, it does an amazing analysis of what the problem is. My dispute with them comes to what is being proposed as the root solutions. And I think partly it's because they do not even recognize inequality as a very critical existential crisis of our time. So when you talk about food security in this country, the problem is not production. And I think everyone keeps saying about production. We produce enough, we waste enough, and a lot is eaten by pests.
How much is enough?
So I think it's just enough. So I think enough from a point of we can feed everybody if we managed to redistribute it very, very well. There are pockets in this. We have people with maize in Rift Valley from last year in their warehouses. But then we are importing maize from other places. And then as we speak, there are people in Northern Frontiers, Mandera, Marsabit, Turkana, who are starving to death because they have no food. It is a failure of the markets, and where I think now the state needs to come in and compensate for those market failures. It fails very, very fundamentally to make sure that the people who experience these shocks of the drought with the COVID-19 are protected. And I think Muga was saying that government should not be giving money to the poor. I think the government, actually, part of the government's existence is to give money to the poor, to give money to the people living with disabilities, is to make sure Daniel Kahneman, the purpose of government is not to increase happiness, it's to reduce misery. So if the state focused on reducing misery, we would all be very, very happy and well. And one of those ways of reducing misery is actually making sure that if we face shocks in life, be it a drought, be it a pandemic, be it a locust infestation, be it a flood, be it an accident and loss of ability to work, be it old age and we are unable to work, that actually comes in, and there is a social assistance that it assures us as citizens.
But then it also must be sustainable. And I think that's one of the things like OXFAM, for example, talks about all the time.
Yes.
Sustainability in these things, whether it's food security or you have sources that are sustainable. If we're talking about putting money into the hands of people, then that also must be a sustainable action. Is it something that you're going to be able to continue doing, or are you going to do it the first time and then make sure that this money then is plowed into sustainable resources as well? So what are we looking at here? And if we're saying that the government is doing a deplorable job of doing that, most times the eye then needs to be cast on as an example of what should be the way. And we know that there's some models that Oxfam has used. What are those? And then, so those are two questions. How can it be sustainable? How can it be sustained? And what examples have been used in the past that, the mirror can be cast on?
So the sustainability question is a very dynamic one. I think when you look at, for example, the government's ability to create an enabling environment for people to be entrepreneurial, for young people to work, that can be sustainable. And I think for me, the governments of the day should focus on creating that enabling environment for sustainable ways for the people who are able to work to continue to work. And then governments have to be able to tax enough to be able to then meet some of the social burdens of society. That, again, is very, very sustainable. I think in every economy, young people usually work. They get, young people who are able to work. They are taxed, and their tax is used to pay pensions for people who are not able to work, but also to provide education and health for young people who need that investment into their own development to get into the working bracket. That is the whole sustainability model, that we create an enabling environment for those who are able to work. Done. We tax them. And I think we can talk about the tax inequality in this country where the poor pay more. Once you've taxed them, then you provide those public services, whether it's health, education, to prepare young people, the children, all of us equitably. Whether you belong from a poor family or a rich family, you have the right to have education to prepare yourself to the productive years of the future. But then also, once you get old, that the young people of that generation are being tasked to provide you with the social assistance you require in the older days. Or if for an unfortunate event you become disabled and you live with a severe disability, that the state will tax and you will get, like the Inua Jamii is a very great innovation that should be deepened and expanded, that you are protected from living a miserable life, and undignifying life, because the general population that is able to work is taxed, and that money is used to give you benefit as well. Or education, for example, that as a government, you are taxing and then you are investing into the education system. And I think we were talking earlier about the whole concept of human capital, for example. We are not human capital, we are people. And governments should be able to tax to be able to invest in universities for people who just want to think. And because we've underinvested in universities, our philosophers do not have that freedom and the peace of mind to just sit there and think. And I think part of our problem as a society is that actually
thinking is not an income-generating activity.
But it's because we are thinking with income generating.
What are you thinking? You're sitting there thinking.
Actually, it is.
Of course it is. I'm just saying, in this country, that's how it's treated.
Yes. So all our thinkers are now doing consultancies.
Yes.
So partly we have diverted
Just
all
sit
our
there and
thinkers.
think. You'll think your thinking will take your children to school. You think.
Actually, it does, because it's that thinking that enables you to seek further education, B, look for, as you're saying, a consultancy. Then, when you're in the consultancy or in employment, you think of new and better ways. The idea is to not stop thinking.
Absolutely.
And not stop being innovating. And I think what Dr. Kitui is speaking about is this tunnel vision that people are shepherded into, where all the focus is on primarily just how to work and how to make money, as opposed to...
And then die eventually.
Yes. Instead of taking a deep breath and saying, okay, why don't we take time and look at this thing again and ask whether this is really the right direction. There's one question we didn't ask when we were talking about these patterns. Apathy. Are we likely to see greater apathy in this election than we've seen before, and which demographic group are we likely to see it in? I'm saying this because you mentioned the youth. Not just a sleeping giant. This one is a moribund giant, because the youth are their best enemies because of the outlook they have. Someone's going to say, well, society is always this and the other. If the youth feel they don't want to vote simply because nothing has been done in the past, well, an opportunity gone. If the youth feel these things never change, so there's no need for them to vote, again, you've let a beautiful opportunity simply go by, and it's gone. Are we going to see greater voter apathy in this election than we've seen in the past? Because the voter apathy, I've looked at people who determine through polls and analysis and strategies telling us about how this election is going to go. I don't see the discussion of apathy coming in. There is the story of the undecided. The undecided, as presented, doesn't tell you the whole story, because the Kenyan will not tell you exactly what they're thinking and what they're planning. They'll tell you what they think is plausible and leave it at that.
I don't think, for me, there are two ways to look at it. So the apathy will not be there partly because it's a very high-stakes elections. It's a transitional one. All the pollsters have shown it's a very close race to call.
And you believe what these pollsters tell you?
Okay, whether we believe or not, I think the common citizens like myself would likely to actually judge that this is a very close call. So I must go out, or actually my candidate will lose. So in that sense...
You're not a common citizen, but anyway, just go on.
So let me continue as a common citizen. Yes. So I think many people will come out to vote, especially in the rural areas, or the majority of people who are just voting for this is my person, this is my tribal chief and everything. People will come out to vote because it's a very high stakes and a very close elections to call. Now, on the other hand, if you really vote on the basis of issues, the question you have to ask yourself is, what is this election about? And I think John Kidhongo, if I'm not wrong, has actually said since 2002, this is the first election that's about nothing. That fundamentally, there is nothing at stake in these elections. And I tend to believe him, because I think when you look at, for example, the manifestos, they focus on the root problems of inequality, for example. Or even let's talk about climate change. I think we haven't mentioned climate change. We ought to mention climate change alongside inequality. If you look at inequality, economic inequality, social inequality, and climate change as an existential crisis of our time as a nation, and the manifesto's failure to address some of these issues, is this election about anything at all? And does it inspire anyone to wake up at 6? Will Latif wake up at 6 a.m. and say, let me go vote because inequality is at stake, in climate change is at stake?
You see, now that's the problem. And we had we had John Gidongo here as well. We took him on that particular article that he had written. This is the first election about nothing. And we asked him, what is something? You see, if we start defining something in those terms as, climate change and all, if that is not how it's translated in the Kenyan population, then it's about nothing. But if it's about unga, if it's about jobs, if it's about the state of the economy, I keep arguing that I think this is an election about the state of economy. If you look at the campaign messaging, the manifestos, like you're saying, they identify the root cause, that there is, inequalities in terms of job opportunities, the inequalities in terms of incomes and all, and they're looking at ways in which those can then be jump-started. Where is it? Manufacturing? Is it improving the agricultural sector? Why the agricultural sector? Because Kenya Kwanza have said, it can have a multiply effect, blah, 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 blah. This other side have said one industry per county. Why? Because it can have that impact and effect of creating job opportunities and creating industry and all. Why economy? I think it's about the economy.
The question you have to ask is, how come the private sector has not been able to do that already? And what can the state do to enable that? So, for example, the industrialization question, I think for me the greatest opportunity we have is in the value addition. We export a lot of raw materials. When you look at the extractive sector, for example, especially all this renewable energy and everything else, and I think when you look at the Azimio's manifesto, it's very, very good in terms of we will produce all these copper products in Kenya, or we will add value on all these raw things. We'll produce Nescafe in this country as opposed to exporting our coffee. The question you have to ask is, since independence, how as a nation have we failed to enable the entrepreneurial Kenyans to set up these enterprises? And will the state do it? And I think for me, it's the how of the question. The problem is not about saying the problem, the job creation, inequality, and everything else.
Can I attempt to answer that question?
Yes.
Successive governments have actually killed institutions that were set up at independence and leading on to the intervening years, that were set up to do precisely that. They were deliberately killed. Whether it was ICDC, whether it was KIE, they were killed. Whether it was Agricultural Finance Corporation,
KVDS,
just KTDC, just talk about Kenya Trading Corporation, you just go through the entire list. You look at countries that have moved from being third world banana republics to the takeoff economic stage where they're now doing wonderful things. They've had that sort of government support. Even these so-called hugely developed Eastern economies. That's why they're where they are. And we had it. We had that system in place. We didn't water it down. We actually killed it. So now, when we're talking about this, there's a generation that saw a glimmer of this with President Kibaki's presidency, where you actually saw the government making it possible for you. We actually don't need to be told how to grow stuff. We just need to be able to have money. Kenyans will do it themselves. They don't need to be told how to make coffee. They'll figure it out.
The enabling environment.
Yes.
But when you look at the Constitution, Muga, do you see these manifestos articulating the how they're going to create the enabling environment for that to happen, or they're just telling us they're going to create industries for us to? I don't think for me government can create industries.
I'm seeing them giving the how.
Is the how, the details of the how.
I've seen some of them giving the how. Giving the how by saying, if we say that counties, for example, focus one industry per county or one product per county, what is it that's going to happen at the county level? The laws, that's what they say, the Azimio Manifesto. It's the laws by the counties, the enabling environment, the taxation regime, the coming up with one tariff, all those things then create that attraction for the private investment to come in. And then using the government support in terms of policy to enable that. I see it.
Latif, I think what I've heard is examples being given as saying Kitui, Kitui government created this industry on textile. Or Makueni County or whatever county created this industry that does mango. I am, as an individual, anti-government trying to do business themselves to create jobs, setting up companies. I think for me that's a wrong model. That's not what government is meant to do. Right. Government should create an enabling environment for the private sector itself to establish those industries, and they should focus on creating an enabling environment for whatever industry to emerge in whatever county.
Like the one the Makueni County and the Jubilee administration have done in Kitui, where this Italian oil giant has now opened a biofuels factory in Makueni.
When you say government
enabling environment,
should the enabling environment means a complete absence of government participation? Because the government has to participate.
No, it's the yes. So the government has to participate. I think for me, it's from more of a regulatory perspective.
Point of view.
And enabling for finance to flow, for example. Protection of local industries by making sure that they protect the textile industry, for example, so that we can wear our own clothes. I went to Ethiopia, and Ethiopians are very proud people. They wear their own clothes. There is no mtumba. Someone mentioned mtumba and everyone jumped through the roof. But if we created an enabling environment for textile, for cotton, and all these things to thrive, then we can have the industries.
So I hear you, Dr. Kitui, saying that, here we are saying that then the skeletal environment then is what is the job of government. Put the structure in place. If we're talking about licenses, for example, make sure that there's a smooth flow. If we're talking about protectionism now when it comes to local farmers, make sure that the laws are in place that enables that to happen. If we're talking about global agreements and negotiations that must take place, then that is the job of government to then allow the worker bees, as it were, private sector and entrepreneurs to then be able to move this vehicle forward.
So the government should focus on creating an enabling environment, as you say, to do that, and then tax this enterprise and then use that tax to reduce inequality. Who's being left behind that needs protection? People living with severe disabilities, orphans and vulnerable children, elderly persons, people who are going through shocks, that now the taxation is used to make sure that they get social protection, invest in education, make sure there's universal education, universal health care, so that the young generation can know I can do all the education I want to whatever level I want, and then I can do whatever I want to do in future to reduce inequality, to address the issues of climate change. But the government should not 100% focus on creating industry themselves.
Creating the industry and running the industry.
No, they shouldn't. I think their mandate is very, very clear in states where that has worked.
In about a minute, Dr. Kitui, as OXFAM Kenya, as the work that you've been doing and looking at the country and the general direction that we are heading, looking at the political promises that have been made, what would you tell the Kenyan who is preparing to vote on Tuesday? What should their focus be when they're electing the leader from MCA to president?
I think it's the issues. I think Kenyans should look at the manifestos and for all its worth, look and see which manifesto is promising to create an enabling environment for me to exercise my entrepreneurship, to do something about it. And I think for me that should be the fundamental one. The second one should be a manifesto that talks about how to reduce poverty and inequality, and also a manifesto that talks about climate change. I think for me these are very, very fundamental things that states should be doing, that we should be trying to encourage going forward. And I think as the more we start voting on the basis of issues, the more I think future elections will be driven by issues as opposed to just promises of goodies that are all tied to sound economic theory.
Very well said. Always a pleasure having you here. Always a pleasure, engaging. You're very controversial in your thinking, which is a good thing.
With Muga here, it's always necessary to be controversial.